Legendary F1 designer Adrian Newey is joining Aston Martin. Financially, it's one of the biggest moves F1 has ever seen. But what does this mean for the future of not only Aston Martin, but F1 itself? Also, as we head to Baku, we delve into McLaren's team orders dilemma. I'm Jenny Gow, and this is 5 Live Formula One. I have been waiting to make this show all year, and while we'll be looking ahead to Baku, we'll delve into papaya rules and the championship battle, we have to start with what Lawrence Stroll, the owner of Aston Martin, called the most exciting news in F1. Andrew Benson, F1 correspondent, and Jolyon Palmer, former F1 driver, are here. And Andrew, is Stroll right? Is this the most exciting news in F1?
It's the most exciting news for him. There's no question about that. You can sign Adrian Newey, even on the large amount of money that he's done so. That's a game changer for your team. Lawrence Stroll, for a long time, it's been very obvious, has had very big ambitions. He wants the team to win the World Championship. He wants his son to win the World Championship. And there's no better guarantee of success in Formula One than Adrian Newey, and he's delved deep into those deep pockets of his to get him.
Jolyon, can you put this move into some sort of context for people at home?
Well, it's pretty massive. This is a guy that's built race-winning machinery pretty much every single team that he's been at. He's won championships with almost all of them as well, with Williams, with McLaren, with Red Bull, and then now he's moving to Aston Martin. And he's not only won championships, he's had dominant eras. He's had some of the best drivers working with him as well. He's got so much experience. And I think what's really exciting for me about the move is, okay, it's a legend that's changed teams, but he's gone to Aston Martin, who have not won a championship. They've not won a race. They've had a sort of false dawn last year. They've got a double world champion at the helm, but Fernando's getting on a bit. And it's all about getting another team, hopefully, to be a championship contender. Adrian Newey is not signed for Aston Martin to be anywhere but winning a championship.
Okay, let's hear from him, Adrian Newey, on why he joined Aston Martin.
I felt as if I needed a new challenge, and towards the end of April I decided I needed to do something different. Took a bit of time off. Lawrence and I have known each other off and on over the years. I was very flattered to have a lot of approaches from various teams, but really Lawrence's passion and commitment and enthusiasm is very endearing. It's very persuasive. If you go back 20 years, then what we now call team principals are actually the owners of the teams: Frank Williams, Ron Dennis, Eddie Jordan, etc., etc. In this modern era, then Lawrence is actually unique in being the only properly active team owner, and I think that does bring it's a different feeling when you have somebody like Lawrence involved like that. It's back to the old school model, and to have the chance to be a shareholder and a partner is something that has never really hasn't been offered to me before. So it's a slightly different slant. It's one I'm very much looking forward to. It became a very natural choice.
So Andrew, that's Adrian Newey on why he joined Aston Martin. Can you add anything to that on why you think he did and why he didn't join Ferrari or any of the other teams that he was linked with?
Well, on Aston Martin to start with, there's a lot of reasons why you would join for him. He likes a challenge, first of all, and they're fifth at the moment in the Constructors' Championship, so it's a challenge to get them to the front. And if he does it with him in charge, obviously he's going to get a lot of the credit for that. He's not an egotist, Adrian Newey, but obviously he's well aware of how good he is, and he'll enjoy that challenge. There's a lot of people there that he's worked with, particularly the technical director, Dan Fallows, so he kind of knows what he's getting into there. The new factory is very impressive. There's been a lot of work put into making that a nice environment to work in, and Adrian Newey was saying actually at the launch of his signing, so to speak, that I took it as an allusion to McLaren, that he'd been to new factories that didn't work that well in terms of being a creative space, promoting creative thought, whereas this one did, he says. And then there's the other thing that he mentioned was the old school type of ownership structure. He made a point of saying that back 20 years ago, what we now call team principals were the owners of the team, Ron Dennis, Frank Williams, and so on. He said Lawrence Stroll is now basically the only person who's ever present in Formula One in terms of a team, who is also the owner. And I think he didn't say this, but I think he likes the idea of, a shortcut to the top, if you like. And I understand that he's missed Dietrich Mateschitz, who died in October 2022, the former head of Red Bull. He's missed that idea of him being around. There's a whole load of other complications around Red Bull, which have also ended up driving Newey away from that team, including the allegations against Christian Horner and his behaviour towards a female employee, which Horner denies. In terms of Ferrari, they definitely talked. He was at one point going to go and look at houses in Italy, but then Ferrari's interest cooled for whatever reason. And there's a lot of rumours around in Formula One about why that might be, but ultimately their interest dimmed, and that's their call. Whether that's a wise call or not is a different question, but that was their call.
And it was quite some unveiling. We're talking about a technical person. He's gone in at a very high level, and he's got so much success behind him, 25 titles behind him. But I've never seen this sort of pomp and ceremony. Even when a driver joins a team, they don't get unveiled like this. This is like turn the clocks back 20 years and maybe, but this was massive.
Well, I think that's just a sign of how well regarded Adrian Newey is. I've said already the track record he's got. He's earning an incredible amount of money with this deal as well. And so if you're going to pay someone up to £30 million a year, you've got to show off your asset, haven't you? I mean, it's a coup for Aston Martin. They've done a lot of work at the factory. They have a champion driver. Now they have the best technical mind in the game. This is, I think, a big part of Aston Martin saying, we're here. I know they've faded away this year, but for the future, they are still very much involved in this project and they want to be champions.
Does this shift the game for F1 in terms of, we know the big four teams, we know that the challenges that they have, Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren have got themselves up there as well, and Red Bull. Does this make 2026, when the new rules come in and Aston Martin will then hope to be at the top of the field, does this change the pecking order?
Potentially. That's what Stroll is buying into, isn't it? The idea that Newey will change the pecking order. This is the point that Newey negotiated an early exit from his Red Bull contract to enable him to work for another team in plenty of time to have an input into the new regulations that are coming in 2026. He starts work at the beginning of March. It's a little bit late because obviously the rules are actually open for teams to work on aerodynamically from January the 1st or 2nd next year. So he's going to miss that first couple of months. Or is he? How are people going to really keep an eye on that? I don't know. But there's plenty of time to have an input into the aerodynamics of that car. He will be drawing that car, I'm sure, as soon as he can on his drawing board at home, because he has one at home as well as in the factory. And that's going to get fed into Aston Martin. So if you look at what they've got lined up for 2026, they've got Adrian Newey now, they've got a Honda engine, they've got Fernando Alonso driving the car, they've got all the ingredients. The only question is, can they get the team to work together, and lift it up from being a bit rubbish at the moment in their terms to the top of the field in that short space of time? That is a big ask, even with Adrian Newey. But
the Newey signing just shows how serious they are, I think. They're not here to fill the numbers. They have all the ingredients. They also now show that they're going to throw money at getting the best people in the right jobs. Max Verstappen has been well rumoured to be looking at Mercedes for next year. That's not going to happen. But also for 2026. Now you think Aston Martin could be a chance for Max to work with Adrian Newey again, to work with Honda. The cogs start to open now when you see, when you're a top driver and you see a team like Aston Martin with all the infrastructure they've put in and now signing the best technical mind, it's quite an appealing prospect to go to that team.
Yeah, there's a lot of drivers who are going to be thinking, actually, that's really interesting. with Mercedes, for example, everyone's expecting Verstappen to go to Mercedes at the end of 2025 because things aren't going that well at Red Bull at the moment. And Mercedes, they've just signed this Italian protege, Andrea Kimi Antonelli. If Verstappen does go there, then that effectively next year is a showdown between George Russell and Antonelli for the seat alongside Verstappen if Verstappen does move to Mercedes. Russell at that point looked like he might be in a bit of trouble because, are you really going to get rid of your 18-year-old protege? But now there's an opportunity at Aston Martin. And, if Lawrence Stroll is in for Adrian Newey, the next time the driver contracts come up, by the way, Fernando Alonso is under contract till the end of 2026, not the end of next year. So that complicates things slightly. But you're looking at the likes of Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, George Russell, Max Verstappen. They're all going to be looking at Aston Martin and thinking, as Julian says, maybe Mercedes isn't such a great idea if you're Verstappen. Maybe I wait and go to Aston Martin a year later.
And in turn, it's even worse news for Red Bull. Not only have they lost the technical director, but he's gone to a team that's currently fifth, and he's making them probably a more desirable prospect to go to than Red Bull, who are champions. The way that they're falling away at the moment, and they have their own new engine manufacturer coming in with Ford in 26. And you're thinking, if you're George Russell, you're Lando Norris, any of these drivers that Andrew mentioned, you've now got Aston Martin as a viable alternative, and Red Bull could be left in a bit of a pickle with their own lineup if they don't keep Max.
Talking about Alonso, Andrew, could he potentially win his third world title in 2026? I mean, the stars are aligning. This is it.
Well, it all depends on the car, doesn't it? But, even by his own admission, he's not having his best season. But also, as he points out himself, he's still, trousering Lance Stroll. Now, maybe that's not such an achievement, but nevertheless, he's still operating at a very high level. He doesn't particularly like the way the Aston Martin car behaves this year, and that's I won't get into the details of that, but that's affecting his form slightly. But if the Aston Martin is competitive and he's driving it in 2026, which he's contracted to do, why can't he win the World Championship?
How old will he be?
He'd be 44, coming up for 45.
That's the one thing I think if you're Newey and you're entering what could be a new regulation, really exciting, is a 44 to 45-year-old Fernando Alonso the guy that you really want to... I know he's a brilliant driver, I have a lot of respect for him, but is he necessarily the guy that you want to carry the flag? Certainly it's not Lance Stroll in the other seat. So that's the one thing I imagine Adrian's looking at. I know he respects Fernando hugely.
Well, he's always said he wanted to work with Hamilton or Alonso. And I think Hamilton will be slightly upset and rue the decision because he's gone to work with Alonso. So they'll get one decent year before I'm assuming at the end of 26, Alonso has said he's going to retire.
He's very much not said that.
Oh, okay.
I don't think he ever thinks he's going to retire.
Exactly.
He's going to be 54 before he's thinking about retiring.
Much like Adrian Newey, he just keeps on going.
The thing about it is that, everyone's assuming the guy's in his mid-40s. His performance has got to fade away at some point. Surely it's got to tail off. Surely he's going to step away. Surely. But as Jolien says, he keeps saying age is just a number. He doesn't. These cars are not that physically demanding to drive. It's not about age. It's about performance and of the car fundamentally. And he says he'll step away when he, feels that he's not able to do it anymore. Now, of course, someone else might make that decision for him. But there's no sign of him wanting to do that right now. So it's a really interesting situation going into that year with Alonso theoretically in the last year of his contract, assuming everything carries on as it's contracted to do at the moment. What's going to happen? It just adds... Formula One's always full of intrigue, right? But here's just another bit of intrigue to add into the mix. I
just need to bring up two of the downsides of this deal for me looking at it. And we haven't really talked about his relationship with Lawrence Stroll, who he'll report into directly. And Lawrence Stroll is, he's a multi-millionaire, if not billionaire soon. He has his own particular way of working. How will that relationship go?
Well, Stroll is a singular personality, and everybody in Formula One has heard the stories about shouting matches when he's not happy, that he doesn't suffer fools gladly, he wants what he wants and he goes all out to get what he wants, and we've seen all that with all the money that he's invested in the team so far. But I don't think that you sign Adrian Newey and then, first of all, expect things to happen with the click of a finger, or two fingers even. And I don't think you would start to question that early on in the relationship. I think my own opinion, it's only an opinion, Stroll will be mad to start, questioning Newey, making things difficult for at least a couple of years. Why would you? This is the greatest Formula One designer in history. You're spending, up to 30 million a year, as Jolien said, to have him. Why would you start making his life difficult? And certainly Newey wouldn't appreciate that sort of behaviour towards him.
And the other thing we kind of need to address, we've mentioned it already, but Lance Stroll. How is this team, Jolien, going to work going forward with the relationship between Lawrence and Lance and their ambition to win a championship?
I think that's the tricky bit for Adrian at this point. He's gone to the team. He's said how much he admires Fernando Alonso. He's not going to think that highly from the outside of Lance because he's been beaten by his teammates for many a year now. The difficulty is the guy that you just mentioned, Lawrence Stroll, is the second driver's dad. So I think he's going to have to be political on that. And I don't know. I think that's the interesting thing will be what happens with the second seat alongside Fernando for 26. If Aston Martin are really serious, is Lance Stroll the best person they can put in that car? Absolutely not. Does Adrian Newey have any clout to do anything about it? Probably not. So really that's up to Lawrence Stroll and also the market movement. If Lawrence Stroll has a decision to make whether to sign Max Verstappen or keep his son in, that's tricky.
He'll keep his son and sign Max Verstappen. The team exists to make Lance world champion. That's why Lawrence Stroll's in Formula One.
They've got to sign a worse teammate then, haven't they? Because he's not going to do it alongside Max Verstappen.
No, exactly. Or Fernando Alonso, or Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, or...
So what, effectively at that point, Aston Martin signed the best technical director. They've done that, the best technical mind. Then they need to get rid of the number one driver and sign a number 3 driver to go alongside Lance so that Lance can be ahead and be champion.
Which they're not going to do, are they? They're going to sign the best driver, so
Lance will never be champion.
There's an automatic paradox there, isn't there, that Lawrence Stroll has to deal with. Yeah, exactly.
So he needs his son to step up. That's the reality. And if Lance can't do that in the next couple of years against a 43-year-old Fernando Alonso, is there a point where the racer that is Lawrence Stroll says, okay, I actually want to win now for myself and the team. Lance, you've had a fair crack, but we are going to be champions. I put this much in, got every part of it right. It's time to put in Max Verstappen.
I know any sporting parent at home right now, or maybe theatrical, whatever their son or daughter's talent is, will be having that same kind of thought of, how far would I go if I had unlimited money to make sure that my son or daughter succeeded? And it's impossible. It's absolutely
what is
impossible.
Success for Lance Stroll?
Well, we know what it is for Lawrence.
He's had podiums. He could be a race winner. Yeah, maybe it's that. But I don't see a world where, in any case, Lance is champion.
Right, we need to move on because we've got another big topic to get into. And I woke up this morning, the first thing I did, check my phone, and there, Andrew Benson, message, McLaren ask Piastri to back Norris title bid. That's the headline. And I went straight into it, read it all, was utterly consumed. Andrew, just tell us, why did this occur?
Well, McLaren have come to the realisation that they can win both world championships. And I think it's almost caught them a bit by surprise. They didn't expect to be this good this soon. And they have this philosophy at the team that they race fair and they treat the drivers equally. And they've been trying to uphold that philosophy all year so far. But they've got to the point now where they realise that Norris can beat Max Verstappen. And it's taken this long because Red Bull have been so strong for so long. I don't think McLaren really believed that Red Bull would fall off as much as they have, is point one. And point two, they didn't believe that their car could be competitive at every race circuit. But the last 2 or 3 races have convinced them that it can, particularly their performance in Monza last time out. So they've realised they have to make a decision. Now, this doesn't mean blanket team orders. Piastri always has to be behind Norris. They're still adhering to their philosophy of fairness, but they are reserving the right, effectively, to ask Piastri to cede to Norris if the situation arises, if the team consider it to be the right thing to do. So, yeah, in a nutshell, they're determined to win both championships, drivers and constructors. So constructors looks a lot more doable. They're only 8 points behind at the moment, and they're going to do everything they can, but they're not going to just do anything they can. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a precise thing that they're trying to orchestrate, which in itself is very hard to do. Lando is currently 62 points behind Max Verstappen. Is that gap closable, Jolyon? Do you honestly believe Norris is in a title fight?
Yeah, of course he is. McLaren have the best car at the moment. Red Bull do not. 8 points. He has 8 points per race to take out of Max. He's done that for the last 2 races. I think McLaren are a little late to the game on this. I think they've thrown away points in Monza that they needn't have done. And I think there's a few confusing factors that people have sort of been warped into thinking that Red Bull are completely lost and they're suddenly the 4th best car. They're not the 4th best car. It's close. Some days they will be. But 2 races ago, Verstappen was on pole at Spa. Could have won the race. And even the race before last, he finished 2nd. So for Lando to haul in that 8 points per race is not going to be as easy as Monza looked. And I really think that McLaren needed to maximise their opportunity already by Monza, really, to home in, because the gap is bigger than anyone's ever closed in Formula One history. That's how tough it is. I think they've missed a beat already in Monza, but it sounds like largely they're on the right path now of thinking Piastri's not going to win the championship. He's just too far back. Norris can, so they have to try and get Lando to give everything he can.
Well, let's hear from Lando Norris.
A lot of people think it's very simple and very straightforward. It's not. People can believe what they want and come up with their own opinions, but Oscar's also a driver fighting for his own championship, his own career, and that's a very valid reason for him to want to fight and do well, So it depends what the positions are for, what positions we're fighting for. There's many different scenarios. So people on the outside think it's an easy, simple thing. It's not. But we've come up with a good plan of how we can approach it all.
So you've heard from Lando Norris. That's what he's got to say. I mean, the margins are so tight now. 8 points in the Constructors' Championship. That's all that is in the way of them overtaking Red Bull, and that's a big thing for them. So are McLaren doing the right thing by imposing these kind of team orders?
Well, the catalyst for this was Monza in a number of different ways. So first of all, they kind of surprised themselves a little bit by how quick they were at Monza, because that last year the car wasn't that good on that kind of circuit, low downforce, low speed corners. But in Monza it was the quickest car. They qualified 1st and 2nd. Then they allowed the drivers to race like they have been doing all year. And by doing so, Piastri passed Norris at the 2nd chicane. Norris had a slapper on, a slide. Leclerc got past in the Ferrari, split the McLarens and went on to win the race. So although Norris has lost 10 points to Piastri over Hungary and Monza by McLaren not favouring him with team orders, the team collectively have potentially lost more points by not winning at Monza, which they might well have done, or certainly more likely to have done, had the drivers been running 1 and 2 at the end of the first lap. They still might have messed up the strategy versus the one-stopping Ferrari like they did, but still... the confluence of those 2 events has made them realise, actually, by allowing the drivers to do this, we're not only harming Norris's Drivers' Championship chances, we're also harming our own Constructors' Championship chances. And the Constructors is job number 1 for them. It's not only the most winnable thing, it's also the thing that for the team is the most important, because it's the one thing that pays the prize money. The Norris Drivers' Championship, they want to go for it because it's there, they can see it. But it's almost a nice to have. That's my phrase, not theirs. But it's not the first priority.
Yeah, so team principal Andreas Stella has spoken about papaya rules. They used that term in the race at Monza to try and explain what was happening. Do you think this is the right time, the right use of these rules.
So the first thing to say, Jenny, is don't confuse papaya rules with this. They're two completely different things. Papaya rules, which is the thing that Will Joseph, Norris's engineer, said to him on the radio when he was after his pit stop in Monza, that's all that's about. In Stella's exact words, guys, don't take too much risk fighting with each other. As Stella puts it, the papaya rules only have to do with racing with no risks, no contact between the two McLarens, and respectfully, it's nothing to do with team orders favouring one driver against the other in the championship.
Papaya rules is essentially nothing. It's the same as every other team does. It's before you go into a race. I had it with Renault. You'd be starting 11th and 13th or something, and it's like, guys, don't crash into your teammate. That's all papaya rules is. But it sounded good, didn't it? When you were thought there was some master plan behind it. They're just on the front row together and they were told not to crash into each other. And they nearly did, but they got away with it. But that's all papaya rules was. This is different now.
So is this the right time? Have they left it too late? Do you actually think Norris needs the backing of the team?
We don't know, but they are against the odds trying to win this championship. The right time was before Monza, because they threw away 3 points needlessly, potentially threw away 10 points needlessly, because Lando could have gone on to win the race had he been ahead at the start. But even then, the part of me admires McLaren for letting their drivers race. It's fun to see a race. The move that Piastri did was sensational at the start. Take nothing away from that. He's driving brilliantly. But for the logic of trying to win both championships, for me, the constructors is McLaren's. They have the best car. They've got two drivers capable of winning, and Red Bull are falling away and at best have one driver that can fight for a win. The way they've overhauled over 100-point deficit to be 8 points with 8 races to go, they'd have to do something wrong to get the constructors now, I think. That's in their pocket unless they have something catastrophic. It's all about now focusing on the Drivers' Championship. I cannot understand the logic for not swapping the positions, at least on the last lap of Monza. Because if you're a driver, I understand the difficulty of Budapest, for example, asking Piastri, or they actually did it the other way around, but effectively asking Piastri to give up the win to Norris. Oscar's never won a race. He's led it from the start. At that point, Max was looking like he was unassailable in the championship. And I think that changes everything. But you have Zandvoort. You come back after the summer break. Zandvoort, McLaren had a big upgrade package. Wow, did it work? They were nearly 4/10 up the road from the nearest competition. Lando won with the most dominant win of the season. And then they turn up to Monza and they're on a 1-2 and Verstappen is 7th on the grid. At this point on Saturday night, you've got to start thinking, hang on, guys, just maybe we can get it. Forget the constructors. That'll work out if we can try and get the drivers anyway. But just maybe with a pole and a 7th, we can deliver a drivers' championship. And even if they admirably let the drivers race, and still Lando's got to take something on the chin for being passed on the opening lap, and his starts have been a real concern this year. But not swapping them on the last lap for a second or a third, I don't see Piastri kicking up a stink over that. Maybe I don't know the ruthless guy behind it, but they have not maximised 3 points, which when you're talking about trying to overcome such a deficit, could be costly.
So I know there's been a lot of pressure behind the scenes at McLaren. You know, don't forget who Oscar Piastri's manager is.
Mark Webber,
who has his own experience of this sort of situation.
Not multi-21.
Yeah, he was, well, it's even before then. It was not bad for a number 2 driver, remember, at
True.
Silverstone. When he was at Red Bull with Sebastian Vettel, he was the second driver, and they were disingenuous about the way they presented things publicly as a clean fight between the two drivers, and then worked things behind the scenes, which wasn't. It was all in Vettel's favour, basically. Webber didn't like that. He's a very competitive character. He's out to support and back his guy. You know, he works for Piastri, so he's been saying, look, you know, he's been putting his oar in basically, and making it clear that, you know, he doesn't want his driver to be done over. I don't think McLaren are the kind of team that do people over in that way. But still, so there's that pressure. Then there's the fact that, as you pointed out, Jolyon, Norris has made life difficult for himself a few times this year already. You know, he's not made big mistakes, but little things here or there at the start in Spain. You know, the pit stop in Silverstone. Okay, the team messed up the tyre choice, but he went long on that final pit stop. The start in Hungary, where again he was on pole. Little errors.
It's basically the starts.
The starts from first laps. Spa, when he ran wide for no reason at the first corner. He's not helped himself on the starts in the first laps. And I think also the third factor is that McLaren didn't really believe it was possible. Verstappen, every race I've been at this year, Andreas Stella said Verstappen is so strong, or words to that effect, because he has been. He's so consistent. He's still the most point-scoring driver over the last 10 races, even with this slump that Red Bull are going through. And I think also they didn't believe that Red Bull could get themselves in this much trouble. And I think it's worth just saying one thing about that. I don't really know why. I believe that Newey's departure, or effective departure from the Formula One side anyway, must have had an influence. I don't remember in 18 years of Red Bull them ever looking this lost. You know, floundering around, upgrades on, upgrades off. Why isn't the car working? We don't know. We don't know how to fix it. We'll go back and look into it. We've got a gap between Singapore and Austin to get into it. That is not the Red Bull that we know over the last decade and a half or more.
So I agree that they, upgrades on, upgrades off, a lot of discussion from Verstappen on the radio. But then I don't think they're as lost. They're not as nowhere
I agree.
as they seem.
Yeah.
And back to what I said, Spa, Max was dominantly on pole. And he'd have won the race had he started there. But he took an engine penalty and couldn't make it up. And Red Bull thought he could make it up, which is why they took the engine penalty there. So they still had the confidence. In Monza, he qualified 7th. But on another day, he'd have qualified in the top 3.
Well, his Q2 performance in qualifying was electric. If he'd carried that on, it would have been better.
If he'd have found 2 tenths on new tyres, he's in the top 3 of qualifying, maybe the front row of qualifying.
But the other thing they're looking at is the way the Red Bull behaves, the pattern of the car's behaviour. Remember back to Monaco and how slow it was in Monaco. Did Verstappen qualify 6th there, I think it was?
Yep.
We've got Singapore coming up. Remember how bad they were in Singapore last year. Baku, this weekend, another street circuit with bumps. After Singapore, yes, there's a gap, but then it's Austin. Okay, that's a road course. What does Austin have though, Jolyon? Bumps. What does the Red Bull not work well over? Bumps. So I think Stella and his team have looked at it holistically and thought, actually, it's not just about, yes, they're as aware as you are that Verstappen could have won in Spa if he hadn't had the engine penalty that dropped him from pole. And he was second in Zandvoort. And Stella pointed out to me yesterday in the interview that led to this story was that Verstappen has been the highest scoring driver over the last 10 races. They're well aware of that. But they see the way they've dropped off. They see the races that are coming up and they think, do you know what? We've got to give this a shot because we can. And that's what's led to the decision.
But this is what I think of why they didn't already give it everything in Monza,
Yeah.
Having said all that, they had to be thinking that on Saturday night in Monza. And even if you say that the racing at the start was, in the spirit of fair play, again, not swapping the positions at the end was a strange decision. And we will see what happens from here on because it doesn't seem like it's absolutely clear cut either. But I think Norris is in with a chance, but I do think McLaren have to put everything together. And Norris has got to improve his own starts because on another day, it's not Piastri attacking him on the first lap. It would be a Ferrari, Mercedes or Verstappen. And then it's a problem that they can't solve with team orders anyway. And McLaren's strategy department have cost themselves huge points this year. Huge points, many race wins. They can't keep messing it up.
And let's not forget as well, it's not the championship is just Norris against Verstappen, realistically, mathematically speaking. The constructors, the Ferrari are in it definitely because they're only 31 points behind McLaren. But the races, one by one, are not just Norris against Verstappen. Leclerc won at Monza. McLaren think they might even have had the fastest car in the race, Ferrari. Leclerc is brilliant around Baku, where they're racing this weekend. He put the 2021 Ferrari on pole around Baku. How on earth did he do that? I've got no idea, but he did.
Never had a win, though.
No, but, luck has to change eventually. He hadn't had a win at Monaco until this year, had he? So if Leclerc's not on pole on Saturday afternoon, I'll be very surprised.
Are you going to eat your hat?
Well, I've got a new hat, Jenny. It's too soon to eat it. Also, Singapore. Ferrari was super strong at Singapore last year. They're going to be right in the mix in Singapore. So, that all that does is make it harder for McLaren and Norris, and all that does is make it more important that they do everything they can to help Norris.
Yeah, if you don't get the win with Norris, trying to get that 8-point gap over Verstappen every race becomes pretty difficult.
We have to look ahead to this weekend, Baku. As we say, we've kind of already skirted around it, but this is a track I actually quite like. I thought I hated it when it first came on, but now it's 8th running of the event here, and I think it's become a kind of a favourite with everyone because it's great for drivers. Fans kind of like going there because it's so weird to get to. Do you like it?
Fans love going there because it's so weird to get to.
They like it. It's a little seaside trip. You speak to the fans there; they really enjoy going.
Yeah, and you can speak to them all at once, can't you? All 20 of them. It's not the most the best attended race, but it could be a fun race to drive. Again, I never loved Baku. The slipstream is such a big factor. Getting a slipstream around the lap, particularly out of the final corner, can make or break a qualifying lap. It's such a whopping run down the straight. It's 2 kilometres from the last corner to the first corner, flat out through a couple of kinks. But you can race, you can overtake. We've seen plenty of drama there in the past. The fans that are there normally get plenty of action.
All 12.
Yeah. So, no, it's fun. I think also the way this season is going, you head into every single race thinking, who's going to win? Will there be some drama? We haven't needed retirement safety cars. We haven't needed any random elements in recent races to make the races great. Formula One has sort of, under the radar, got itself back into a really vintage position. Maybe the best position it's been in for a long, long time.
Yeah, and I think going into this weekend, you don't know who's going to win, as you say, which is excellent. And we have Oliver Bearman on the grid again, but this time not replacing Carlos Sainz for appendicitis in Ferrari. He will be starting for Haas because Kevin Magnussen had picked up 12 penalty points, so he gets a race ban. Interested to see how Bearman performs in the Haas?
I mean, the guy's on the grid next year. What he does this weekend's not that big a deal, is it? I suspect. Why wouldn't he do a good job?
It's still interesting. I am interested in what Bearman does in the Haas because whilst he's on the grid and this won't change anything, he's 14th in Formula 2. He's won 2 sprint races this year. If we were judging Bearman based on his Formula 2 results, he'd be nowhere near Formula 1 next year. No one is judging Bearman on those Formula 2 results because he's been in the Haas, he's done FP1s before, he did what he did in the Ferrari in Jeddah, and he's in Formula 1 machinery looked very good, and his career before this year has looked decent. But that's why I think this weekend, for Bearman, having had a good couple of weeks to prepare for this, unlike Jeddah, he's been in the simulator, he knows Baku. This is a decent chance for us to see what he can do in Formula 1 machinery with the right preparation against a very established teammate.
And Haas are on the periphery of scoring points now. They've got a car that it can nick maybe 1-2 points. There'll be some sort of expectation on him to try and get that car points.
Well, they're fighting in the championship for 6th with RB. So it's important for them that if the car can get points, that the drivers can deliver it.
So, Andrew, predictions for this weekend. Let's go for the win, but also what's going to happen with Norris and Verstappen.
Top 3, Leclerc, Norris, Piastri.
Where will Verstappen finish?
4th.
Oh, that's a 6-point swing.
It's not enough.
No, it's not enough. That's the problem, isn't it?
Who gets fastest lap, though? You never know. 1 point extra.
I mean, those he's said it, hasn't he? But I'll go for a Norris win. I'll go for a Piastri second, McLaren 1-2, get the Constructors' Championship lead, and Leclerc in 3rd, Verstappen 4th, and it just about is enough. But one final thing on team orders before we finish the pod. If anything happens to Norris and suddenly the championship doesn't look like it's on, like it is now, of course, team orders should go again and Piastri should be allowed to race fairly and compete for wins. It's only when there's this glimmer of hope that they have to be backing Norris.
So let me get this right. In my world, this weekend, prediction-wise, Piastri gets it on pole and leads the race. Norris in 2nd, Verstappen in 3rd. What do McLaren do?
They change the positions. even though they've said they wouldn't necessarily do that if it's for a win. I think I'm in danger of going off on a tangent here. I think one thing that's interesting is that people have looked at some of the races and thought X was faster than Y because of, the Piastri was faster than Norris in Hungary or whatever. A lot of the time, one driver is faster than the other only because the other driver's behind, and the way the tyres work when you're in dirty air, you can't, you see it when they, you've heard a number of drivers say on the radio this year, or I think it was Piastri's phrase in Spa, clean air is king. Just because someone's in front and pulling away, they're not necessarily absolutely the absolute fastest driver.
And here's the final misconception, I think, from this year generally. Do you know when the last time Piastri actually out-qualified Norris was? Monaco. 8 races ago. In the 16 races they've had, it's 13-3 to Norris in qualifying. Norris is still the number one in that team. It's 11-5 in the races, and those last 3 have come from Piastri jumping Lando at the start, which is definitely a weakness that Norris has to work on. Generally, Norris is the stronger driver, and that's why he's in this championship position as well.
Thank you very much to Jolyon, to Andrew, and we also have some exciting news ahead of the US Grand Prix, which is right around the corner. We are gearing up for it with a special Chequered Flag live podcast in front of an audience in downtown Austin on Thursday, the 17th of October. Austin fans, be on your lookout to claim your seat as we get closer to the Austin race weekend. And you can listen to the Azerbaijan Grand Prix from midday Sunday on 5 Live. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.